Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on 100.5 and 790 News Radio WSGW and online at WSGW.com. Here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Well, good evening to everyone that's speaking, that's tuning in. Excuse me. Those of you who are tuning in with us today, we certainly want to thank you for your time and your attention. I am just sitting here and I'm just kind of thinking about everything that is going on in the world. And I just want to take some time really to speak with you. Today, we got an interesting show. I think it's interesting, but we're going to talk about 10 things, 10 little known facts that I think that you guys might be very interested in knowing that are part of Black history, or that we don't always talk about it, or we may speak of these things, but we don't speak concerning them in the light that I'm going to share with you on today. So I want to make sure that we just have a fun conversation. I got my producer in the studio with us today, the Rob Father. Rob, why don't you give a shout out to our United Shades of Gray audience?
Hello, the United Shades of Gray audience. Happy to be here. Happy to see you here, Kareem. Ready for a good show.
Yes, and those of you who are listening to this, it is the 4th of July. It is Independence Day, 1776, July 4th. We are now a great nation and we're doing great things. I'm excited about celebrating this Independence Day. I just had an opportunity, Rob, as we were sharing before, to celebrate Juneteenth, and now it's national holiday status, June 19th. Which is the freeing of the slaves. And now we have the freeing of a nation, or the birthing of a nation. Great times to celebrate. This is so amazing and a great time to be an American, I think, considering everything that we've experienced, Rob, over the last year and a half. It's going to be interesting and exciting at the same time to be able to, when I don't remember a day other than when there was maybe severe thunderstorms as a kid, that we had our 4th of July celebrations canceled, the fireworks portion of it. We always had, hot dogs and hamburgers and did all that stuff. But last year it was like the 4th of July was canceled. We canceled Independence Day. So I think America is excited about the opportunity to get back out and to celebrate and to see the fireworks. I don't know if they're going to be twice as good since we missed a whole year and they're going to double up this year or whatever. But we're excited that this is Independence Day. I hope you guys are enjoying your Independence Day as you listen to this message. Hopefully you've had, some time around the grill, some time with family and friends, and you're getting in the pool, getting wet, and you're preparing for your evening festivities as you listen to this conversation. Rob's looking at me like, yo, what's going on with your voice? I don't know, Rob, what's going on. I'm just excited. Maybe
it's all good.
I'm beklipped. I'm overcome with emotion.
If I may add, it's one thing to celebrate the freedom of slaves and Juneteenth and whatnot, but then again, you cannot ignore the fact that we live in a free country, because a lot of things that we take for granted, we have lots of problems in this country. Don't get me wrong,
a whole lot of them. But
I've traveled many parts of the world. I was in the Navy for 20 years, and I've seen things that makes me glad that I'm an American, or I could have been a Canadian. And this coast here between Canada and the United States, we're one of the freest nations around, and we can't take our freedoms for granted. The very fact we own the air right now.
Oh,
an expression of the First Amendment.
Yes. So we're having the ability to freely express our First Amendment rights. We want to thank WSGW for this opportunity, because this show really it's groundbreaking. And I didn't realize that, Rob, until you began to lay out the aspect in which we are treading in new territory, being two African American men on a very conservative radio station, WSGW 790 and 100.5 simultaneously. So I want to thank the station for an opportunity for taking a risk and a chance on some individuals who we believe in doing the great thing, and it's time for some diversity and inclusion, and they're opening up the doors. We're breaking in doors and breaking ceilings and making great things happen.
And we should thank our listeners, because without our listeners, we could not exist.
Yes, so thank you all.
Thank the listeners for supporting this program.
All right, so we've been talking about these things, and so those of you who are tuning in, we're going to talk about 10 little known Black history facts or moments, or just some intricacies on things that you may know, but we're going to talk about how they may have impacted or how they hit differently when you understand a few very key things. But first of all, our hearts go out to the victims and the families Surfside, Florida. That's right there, that Miami-Dade County, and the collapse of that condo. And, it's been kind of horrific. And initially, Rob, I didn't want to watch any of it because I was like, I'm over the extreme death. I'm over, all of the violence. I just want to see something happy. And there's nothing happy about this experience. And my heart goes out to those family members. And I've been watching as, we are still in with search and rescue, 6 days, 7 days into this. I think the reality of certain things are beginning to set in, but, God still has an opportunity to provide a miracle. If you don't believe in God, higher power, whatever it is that you believe, miracles, I still believe happen. And just as we've had other situations where people have been found under rubble 8 days and, 9 days, 10 days, I think is the longest, we're hoping that we have some light. And I say that not only for the family, but as first responders who are putting their lives on the line, the emotional fatigue, the physical fatigue, being able to have something to celebrate, I think brings a level of, we did this and we were successful to some degree. They need it as much as anybody else. And so our hearts and prayers are continually out there with them. There's going to be a whole bunch of misinformation about what took place, what didn't take place. But I'm going to tell you, Rob, what my theory is on this entire situation. So world, I need y'all to listen in because you're getting ready to hear Kareem Bowen's theory on what I believe is taking place. It's interesting, Rob. The most interesting situation that took place is that the day that all this happened, I was just kind of goofing around that morning, and I woke up and I don't know what made me do this, but I was Googling, hey Google, what's going to happen with Florida in 2025? What's going to happen with, and they're like, oh, they're going to be, Florida's going to be hit by a massive hurricane that's going to put it underwater. But then I began to think about the polar ice caps melting, right? Right. And so I started looking at that, and they were like, by 2025, parts of Florida, which were a part of the Everglades or swamp or whatever it was down there, will be underwater. And so this is their prediction. They were saying over the past 40 years, I think it's risen 7 to 10 inches or something like that. And I was saying, you know what? It's crazy because if this land is going to be now coming underwater, what does that do to those structures? Just the most random thing. It's like the day that I went to the Empire State Building and I asked the guys, has anyone ever flown into these buildings? And they were like, but I did. And then I promise you, 30 days later, September 11th, we were out there right after the
draft. You better be quiet from that one.
September 11th. That's probably why I got flagged the next time I took a plane. They were like, your name is Kareem Jabbar and you're taking you little curly hair black guy. No, but and it was the same situation and it freaked me out when it happened. And this was like, I had that situation. I'm Googling and, just later that evening, my mom called. Remember the crazy conversation you were talking about this morning? Like one of the buildings fell. And my thought was because of the changing in the ocean's climate, because of the increase in the water, that some of that water, more instability, that some of that it would begin to shift the building. And so when this happened, my first thought, like, oh my God, this isn't the first. This is only the first of others that are possibly out there. Exactly. And this morning, Rob, I woke up and the topic of conversation, we had one of the individuals was talking about seismology and how the Ring of Fire is increasing and how water is increasing. And he was outlining the same thing that came to mind the day this happened. It really freaked me out. So we got to really wake up and pay attention to some of the things that are going on. Our climate change is real, whether, some of us want to accept it or not. We see that these polar ice caps are melting. If they melt, that means that the temperature in the oceans are changing. That means the water in that it's available and around us is changing. If water changes, the salinity changes. We are all connected. There's a life science of connectivity that exists. And we have a symbiotic relationship with the world. It's important for us to do what is possible for us to protect the world so that we can protect one another. Now, we've got these massive heat situations going on in the Pacific Northwest, which is really weird. I don't know, Rob, if you've ever been in the Pacific Northwest. You've been in that area. It is what I consider some of the coolest temperatures during the summer. I mean, you get great temperatures. It can get warm, but you get cool breeze. You get a lot of rain, a lot of moisture, so it's not that hot. They're out there frying eggs on the sidewalk right now because it's just been so hot. And they were talking about the increase in the number of air conditioner units are going to be out there. So if air conditioner units are increasing, we're increasing our greenhouse gases, our carbon emission, which means the very thing that we need to be detracting, we're adding to this system. And so and it's necessary because you can die of heat exhaustion and too much heat. So I'm really just hoping that we find a way to begin to make some meaningful change, because all of this is connected. We are one continuous connected life force, and that goes, we are American, we are a life force globally. This is beyond the US, but this is a global situation we've got to deal with. Now I want to get to something we've been talking about for a year and a half. We're celebrating the 4th of July, July 1st, which is coming soon. Our state is basically—
That's tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow.
I mean,
2 days.
2 days.
Yeah. So we'll be basically restriction free as of July 1st. I think businesses have the right to do what they want, but we now see what we have been fearing, Rob, which is the emergence of this Delta variant. Now, both you and I have taken the precaution. We've done our American duty, our patriotic American duty. We've gotten vaccinated, and we've seen that there has been a political divide in a human public health crisis. Now we're seeing this Delta variant that is now surging in California and in the United States. Most places in the United States is becoming the dominant strain. Now, what's interesting is that this particular variant is 50% more contagious than the previous, and it is more deadly, more lethal than the previous variant, which was the UK variant. And the UK variant was 6 times more contagious than the original COVID-19 situation that we were dealing with. California, they're not doing mandates, but there's this, hey, we're going to strongly recommend that if you're around unvaccinated individuals, please wear a mask. This is what we need to understand about vaccinations.
I should interject that.
Go ahead.
The CDC is recommending that if you're inside of a building,
absolutely,
you should wear your mask, vaccinated or not, just to be safe.
And because we're in an honor system that there is no honor among thieves. And so when we look at this, I want to make sure, Rob, that we understand what is important. And the fact of the matter is that the vaccines are so that you don't get the most extreme form of what's taking place. So even though we're vaccinated, we have to take risk and precautions because we can still get sick. So if you're vaccinated and you have underlying conditions, it does still lead to the fact that you don't know how those things are going to interact, and you could still be in a situation which you're hospitalized. And so we want to make sure that we do what is necessary as a community, as a country, as a people. Let's take care of each other. The more individuals vaccinated, the less viruses out there, the less that we'll come into this Delta variant. And I saw what happened in India through my relationships with the Vincentata family, which is a ministry family that I'm connected to in India. We meet each single week, 2 or 3 times. And the leader of this particular Christian organization passed away. They were just showing us images of dead bodies laying in streets and them rolling these dead bodies and really just burning them in ditches, because there's nothing we don't want that to happen in our country, in our America. I don't want to go through another shutdown and a lockdown, but we might celebrate the 4th of July and find out that we might be turning the corner only to go into another series of lockdown, as many other countries are doing. So let's wise up. Let's be smart. I know that during this holiday season, I'm going to be smart during the festivities of the 4th of July. You be smart as well. All right. Derek Chauvin was sentenced to 22 and a half years. Rob, we were talking about justice. You say, no, justice happens at the sentencing. Full justice happens at the sentencing. So justice has now served 22 and a half years in the murder of George Floyd in 2020 of last year. Rob, I haven't even asked you about, what were your thoughts concerning this whole thing? What's your perspective in terms of the sentencing? Because we could have gotten 40 years, I think. But what are your thoughts about 22 and a half years?
I would have preferred 40 years, but, plus he got credit for time served. I'm not the judge. I don't know all the facts, all the intricate details of the case. So I'm going to trust the judge with his judgment on it. And, as long as there's no possibility for parole, it should set an example. But then, or good behavior, rather, it should set an example. I'm going to leave it alone because I need to move on.
I've got to move forward.
And while I feel for the Floyd family and his friends and all that, as a layman on the side, I have to move on and say, okay, well, justice has been done. Now let's get ready for the next case that needs to come to court.
It's time to ante up and go to the next. This is only the beginning,
right?
And so
because there's still Breonna Taylor on my mind.
Absolutely,
Breonna Taylor,
no justice
on my mind.
whatsoever.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So we're this is great. Let's applaud the court system for getting it right. I mean, it's kind of hard to turn your head and not get this right when it's in living color, 9 minutes 29 seconds. So we had a lot going on here. But you're like, there's the Breonna Taylors of the world that are still out there. We
can let this verdict detract us because that's so easy. We could just focus on one thing. Then while we're looking at one thing, everything else is going on without our attention.
Absolutely. So take the moment. We celebrated. Now it's time to continue. There's still more justice that we have to bring to the table. But I do want to say that this is the first time ever in Minneapolis's history that a police officer has been held accountable. And we're talking now about accountability, being held accountable for the things that they do. And now something interesting about this case is that there are federal charges. So Mr. Chauvin could actually find himself life in prison based upon these new federal charges. But I was told that he is now, I think the word is that he is now very close to a plea deal. And this plea deal would mean that he would have to actually, for the first time, talk about what took place with George Floyd.
Oh, you mean testify?
Yeah, he would actually
testify. He
didn't
do at the actual trial.
Absolutely. So it's going to be interesting. We still got a pretty good ways to go. We're going to keep that at the forefront of our minds as we move forward. But I want to just say real quick, I want to thank those companies. I'm working with some amazing companies, Rob. We've had a number of those CEOs coming in and talking with us during our conversations about dismantling systemic racism, and two companies that are getting it right in our backyard. Once again, our Hemlock Semiconductor, they got go to hscandme.com. Those of you who are listening, hscandme.com. And they are putting on, we're working with them. I'm working with them. They're putting on an amazing camp for kids. It's from beginning June 12th, ending the first week of August. Amazing camp for kids. And they're giving away computers as a part of this program. It's solar technology. It is engineering, building design, vectors, and all of these cool things that are going on. STEM kits, STEAM kits, field trips. It is absolutely amazing what they're doing. That's coming up. So if you're listening, this is a great opportunity for you to get out there and go there and check that out. And then also coming up really soon, I've been working with the leadership at Dow Global. So the Dow Chemical Company is presenting what we are calling the Treasure Academy, Rob. And I'm so excited about their investment, a major investment into our community, about what we can do and how we can empower our young people. I'll be doing a lot of that leadership training and developing and talking about how we can work with soft skills. We give kids opportunities, but if we don't have soft skills, how do we introduce ourselves? How do we, how do we talk? How do we position ourselves in life? What things do we do? How do I fill out an application?
What are soft skills? I know they're about.
Yeah, there's simple things that we need to operate in a daily basis. For instance, the introduction. My name is Kareem Bowen. How do you look and shake someone's hand? You're looking them in, square in the face. You're shaking them, shaking their hand. How you present yourself. We're going to talk about etiquette and all of these things.
Cool.
And Dow is doing a major rave up. And I'm going to be tracking these kids. We're going to be tracking myself and Dow and some other educators tracking these kids for 4 years. That's going to be coming up. I think that website is like dowtreasureacademy.com. Don't quote me on that, but I'll tell you as we begin to do more with that. But there's some amazing things that are happening in our community, and I'm so excited about it. All right, so that's what we're talking about. But we're going to talk about 10 little known things in Black history. And so, Rob, we're going to have a great conversation on today. Okay. Those of you out there are listening to us in social media, you have an opportunity to tune in. You can share your comments, concerns, thoughts, ideas. If you got questions, drop them in our chat on our social media feed. We'll get to those things, and we'll begin to have a great conversation with you guys. But when we talk about Black history, we've had some great conversations, Rob, and we've talked about Black history as it related to the beginning of this thing. We've talked about Black Wall Street. Those of you who are out there, there's a huge event that's going on coming up July. I think it's 11 with Black Wall Street, Black vendors that are going to be taking place at what is it? The SBRC building on a Sunday. I think it's Sunday, July 11th, beginning at 2 p.m. So if you're interested in getting involved, if you want some sweet potato pie, I'm sure some of those vendors are going to have sweet potato pie. Somebody asked me always, Rob, what's the difference between sweet potato pie and pumpkin pie? Aren't they basically the same thing?
No, they're not. No.
Rob is losing it.
No.
They are absolutely different. But
those look the same, sometimes smell the same, but never the same.
Very, very, very different. And those are things that I really love about culture. Because, typically white America, they have pumpkin pie, which I've tried pumpkin pie. It just is not the move for me. But, you give me some sweet potato pie and it's over. I'm ready to get, a glass of milk and I can lay back. I can go to sleep and get my comatose sleep in.
If sweet potato pie is done right.
Yeah, if it's done right.
Everybody can make
Everybody can't do it right, but if it's done right. So I want you guys over at Black Wall Street. It's going to be amazing. So come out and support those African-American vendors. I know there will be books that will be sold, Black products. There's a lot of Black businesses that are involved, candle scents making, garments, T-shirts, all kinds of things. Get on social media. I know on Facebook, there is a page about what Black Wall Street is doing. And if you don't know anything about these things, lean in, go out, patronize, be a part. I will be doing the opening prayer for the event. So you can come out and have an opportunity to sit and talk with me and meet me during this event. But I think it's Letitia Whitehead is going to be, she's spearheading this. Get on Facebook. Look her up, but also Black Wall Street. There's a flyer out there. I'll post it in United Shades of Gray because I want not just the Black community to come out and support, but when the Black community does some, we are one America. And this is something that we can allow ourselves to grow as individuals and learn something about culture. You're right. The Saginaw African Cultural Festival. It was a virtual experience on last year. And Rob, have you heard additional information about what they're going to be doing this year?
As a matter of fact, Ralph Martin, who is the president of that,
former Saginaw Fire Marshal, right?
He was on the air on a previous show on George Hartman's show, Community Connections, on our sister station, KISS 107.1, and he mentioned that we having it on August 14th, I believe, and he's still finalizing some dates there. But I wanted to mention that to you because what you said about what's happening in July is similar.
Yeah,
it's all come together to learn more about Black culture, and we're not eliminating any other culture. It's just that this is a exercise of Black pride. If you want to learn more about why Blacks think the way they do, act the way they do, love the things that we do.
Skip that, Rob. You may not get all of that.
I'm just saying, but you come and you see, oh, this is why they love sweet potato pie.
Absolutely.
This is why we have African names. This is why we wear dashikis and things of that sort. Don't
dashiki. Those garbs with the funny prints that some
afros and whatnot.
Yeah,
and do the dance that we do.
Absolutely. And so these are great opportunities, and we're sharing this with our WSGW audience, because I think we are now at a place that it's time for us to begin to lean in and understand that Black history should not be relegated to a single month, but we should be celebrating it as an authentic part of American history. We have been and continue to be a viable piece of what happens in America. And so we want to allow you these opportunities. And I promise you come on over here, your brown skinned brothers and sisters will welcome you with open arms, have you be a part. There's always great entertainment. There's always an amazing community turnout for these events. And I know that the Black Wall Street event is going to be amazing, especially after CNN has just done that wonderful documentary. And also Morris Chestnut. You guys may know Google Morris Chestnut, because Morris Chestnut and another one of my friends, Turk Stevenson, are actually redoing, and they're doing a whole piece on Black Wall Street and the district and how the riots and the massacre impacted that community back then and what we have left of that community on today. We're here today. We're going to get into 10 little known Black history facts. Y'all tune in, tell the family. United Shades of Gray is here. Those of you who are here, thank you for listening and tuning in. Call a friend, call a neighbor, let them know it's time to listen in, because we're about to get our culture on. We thank you guys for your continual patronage. We'll get in here, stay tuned, and after this commercial break, we'll get right into our conversation. Thank you, and stay tuned for more of United Shades of Gray.
United Shades of Gray will continue on WSGW. You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
Hey, this is your host, Kareem Bowen. We're back with more United Shades of Gray, conversations on race in America. Thank you guys for tuning in. For all of you that are out there watching via social media, we want you to continually tune in so that we can have some amazing conversation. We were talking about all of the events that are going on this summer and opportunities to lean in and to learn a little bit about Black culture. All right, so I want to talk about 10 little known Black history facts, because one of the things that we have been talking about is we've talked about Black Wall Street. We've talked about the Harlem Renaissance. We've talked about, all of the things that we don't often hear inside of the books of American history, the annals of American history. And so today I just want to begin to just share some little known Black history months, because as we talk about Black history, we often talk about a handful of memorable moments and events, but there are some things that are very interesting that we need to uncover, and things that I think that are interesting facts just to have conversations about. And one of those things is it's always interesting to know, being an orator, I understand that there is a written message, Rob, that, when I know that I'm going to go out and I'm going to speak to someone, there's some written messages that I'm going to have, and I have my framework in which I have that conversation. But many people would be surprised to know that the most key pieces, the most exciting pieces of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech were actually not included in his speech, but were actually impromptu. And so we now have them, and we have a manuscript that we now can include as a part of his speech. But as many orators, the most prolific parts of your conversation comes when you feel the energy of the audience. And so as he began to deliver that speech, he just allowed the spirit of the moment to begin to dictate what would come next. And so when I began to look at him, like, wait a minute, this dude was up here. He gives this prolific speech, and to find out that some of this was off the cuff, that's when you are graced and you are doing exactly what you have been destined to do. So as I looked at that, I just began to think about how moments, the ones we share here, Rob, how much of the most interesting conversations that we have are not things that are in the text, but sometimes things that just kind of happen as we continue our conversation.
Exactly. And I've had experience when I was in high school. I first started making speeches, and then after that, I could write a speech, but then I just stray away from that because I felt the audience, and then I felt myself. I don't know what it is, but it's just natural. I'm sure you feel the same way when you're
Absolutely.
preaching.
Yep. And so we are, and I think that this is one of the key things. So as we continue to do these things, it's important for us to understand we've got to allow the spirit of a moment to really dictate. And I'm waiting for an opportunity in the Black community with everything that is going on. We're now mid-COVID, post the first surge of COVID, or fourth, third, or whatever it is, and we're entering into an unknown territory. I'm waiting for the voice of Black America that will arise, that unplanned voice that will emerge from the ashes of what has taken place during this COVID experience, that will begin to generate a followership that people will coalesce around, and we will call the voice of our leadership. So that's interesting. Then also, now this is what is something, and as I was working with Microsoft on a virtual Black history, they did a tour in February of all of the Black history. And we had Shai Everett on, who was the curator of this tour. They did a virtual tour of the top African-American museums in the country. And I helped to curate some of those particular tours. And I found out that Claudette Colvin, most people probably have no idea who she was. If I said Rosa Parks, everybody would be like, oh yeah, Rosa Parks. She sat on the bench, refused to give her a seat. But before there was a Rosa Parks, there were other women who refused, who boycotted, who would not give up their seat. But Claudette Colvin was really one of the first ones that gave up her seat. She was thrown in jail. She had gone through all of the persecution, and she was what I would consider a rebel rouser. She got into some good and necessary trouble, as someone once said. But her story, and so Rob, I wondered why we never heard of her, or why her story of really being the first woman to say, I'm refusing to get off of why didn't they celebrate her the way that they did with Rosa Parks? And, it's funny how history plays out, because everybody wants a good storyline, and we need good characters to have a good plot and a good twist. And at that time, the NAACP and other Black organizations thought that her story, and because she had some issues, character issues, that she wasn't the best person to be iconic or to epitomize the boycott. And so when Rosa Parks finally followed suit of other Black women in America, and that takes nothing away from Rosa Parks because she went through and she did her part. But the NAACP and the power, the brokerage of the Black voices, and we see this happen today. We see that the Black voice, the images of Black America are always brokered. We determine who our leaders are going to be, and if other people are doing it, that's fine. But then we promote who is going to be the face of this new movement. So Rosa Parks was chosen because she was a solid character, because of her integrity and because of her character. And I think character matters. But so we see and we know the story of Rosa Parks. But many of us know very little about Claudette Colvin's stand and her arrest and her time that she spent in jail and her continual standing up against the powers that be. Did you know anything about Claudette Colvin?
The name sounds familiar. I was trying to place her face, but the name sounds familiar. And it's interesting you should mention it because in Philadelphia, and as growing up, we learned a lot of things about Rosa Parks, Dr. Martin Luther King, but there are other Black Americans, African Americans who we don't hear much about. And you nail it right there. We determine who is going to be the forefront based on character. So I think that matters. But one of the things, and for those of you who are listening, and I'll say this because it's important as we begin. And I want to think about how I want to say this, Rob, because I know I'm listening to two different audiences. Our social media following is one thing, but those who may hear this conversation on the radio may be completely different. But as we begin to look at this, it's important for us to understand. I always say there are three types of leaders that can lead a community. And I would definitely consider myself, I never did before, but I'm understanding because of the power of radio, the power of the spoken word. I'm a grassroots organizer. I found out my mother has been telling me that I was an activist for so long. And I came in and someone told me, you're an activist. And that was on the other side of the line. They told me it was, what's that? Rebel rouser.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I guess I am a rebel rouser. I embrace those things because I think that activism and activists, they challenge, they speak truth to power, and they command change to take place. And so if that's what it means to be an activist, I'll be one all day long. I guess that kind of is who I embody. But when we look at this, so I didn't ask to be a leader, Rob. But because of my desire to see change happen in our community and my desire to refuse to quiet my voice and to speak up against injustice and to stand for what is right in our community, I guess naturally it puts me in a position that I become a leader of sorts. And so it made me very conscious of the things that I'm going to speak and the things that I say and how I say them, and it's important to understand, and not that I'm going to change my tone, but I recognize the audience to which I'm speaking and understand how that change must take place. But what we have seen and what often happens, and you tell me this, we often see that, I've heard the sayings like, you don't speak, you speak differently or you speak proper. Oh. You speak proper. Yes, you're proper. Yes, you're intelligent. Yes, you speak proper. No, you're different than them. And oftentimes people who are not a part of our community have a desire to dictate who our leadership should be based upon their affinity or their thought on how easy it will be to work with, people in our community. And one thing that I think takes people by storm is don't let the proper voice fool you. Just because, I'm articulate because I think Black people are articulate. I'm articulate because my family put an emphasis on education. But what they also do is they equip me to understand who I am as a Black man. And so so when I talk about types of leadership, and this is a little Black history flag, but what I'm saying is we have often seen three different types of leaders. There's the leaders that are appointed to our community by non-Black communities. Then there's the leaders that our historical leaders, which be the Congressional Black Caucus, it would be the NAACP, it would be those organizations have said are our leaders. But then there are the leaders that emerge naturally from their work in a community. and from building coalitions and support in that community and people following. My pastor, Bishop Marvin C. Pryor, who's late, who is now going to be with the Lord, he used to say, if you're walking and nobody's following you, then you're just going for a long walk. But if you're a leader, then you have the ability to mobilize people, and they'll follow you because of your passion for the purpose and your agenda that you have cast to them. So as we begin to understand the importance of leadership and we move through this cycle, it's important for us to realize, yes, we're going to have those continual, what I call the usual suspects, those individuals that the NAACP, and I have nothing against the NAACP other than the fact that I think there may need to be an update to some of the things and the principles and their boldness in how they represent Black people. But they're going to continually have one set of leadership there. There's always going to be that leadership base that is going, that white America will say, you know, we feel comfortable with dealing with them because white fragility, and we've talked about this for a long time, white fragility is a real thing. And don't be offended. Listen, if what I'm saying to you offends you, I need you to lean in and understand, get an understanding of what I'm saying. And I'm not trying to be offensive. But the fact of the matter that when we talk about race in America, when we talk about slavery, when we talk about systemic racism, those are things that white America shies away from. And when forced to engage those conversations, they often want to say, why are you trying to now reverse discriminate against me? Those kinds of things. And they become victimized and
challenge their comfort zone.
Yeah. And so it's important for you to challenge your comfort zone. It's important for you to challenge yourself to deal with these things. And the fact of the matter, I'm not an antagonist. One thing that I love is that when we can come together and do great things, but in order to do that, we have to have some basic understandings and principles on how we govern and communicate. So there's that set of governance, but I always love the individuals who rise from the ashes. And because of their hard work and dedication, their commitment, and what they're doing in the community, people tend to follow because they see progress and change. That is what I call transformative leadership. And when I talk about Black history, that is the leadership that we are lacking, I think, today, that we don't see the strength of that voice because it's sometimes drowned out by the two other types of leadership. And it's the thing that I'm welcoming and I desire to see happen in our community. Rob, you look like you're thinking or pondering something.
I want to make sure that we don't eliminate the local leaders who are low key leaders that you don't hear about. We're talking about leaders in the Boy Scouts, leaders in your churches, you know.
Absolutely.
If someone's a president or leader of some sort in your church or in your community, organizing a Black party, whatever it is, like you mentioned, people who want to get together with young men and women to teach them how to speak correctly and use proper etiquette. Those are small things there, you know. That's leadership there, and it's a small influence.
All right. And so since we talked a little bit about vaccinations, it's important for America to understand there are a number of things that were designed and created by Black folks that we don't necessarily talk about. And one of those things is inoculation. The inoculation was something that was created by a Black man. How do we begin to go in and we isolate it? And it began in Africa. We isolate these things so that we can study them, so that we can treat them, so that we can then come up with these things called vaccines to prolong strength. And malaria was one of the key reasons why that little African individual was able to come up with this process called inoculations and first used it against the smallpox epidemic. So I thought it was something very interesting as we talk about how Blacks were a key part of the development of this COVID vaccination, that even the process of inoculation was started in Africa. And so I think these things are important because these are things that you never hear about. Another thing that I think that is going to be, and we might want to park here for just one quick second, that the earliest record of protest against slavery took place by the Quakers in 1688, Rob. I need you to take into account that date, 1688. The Quakers, some of the key individuals who came across Philadelphia. We talk about the beginning of our nation. In 1688, the Quakers were saying, listen, we have to stop this extreme abuse of people because of the color of their skin. 1688. What does that tell you? That date precedes what, Rob?
The Revolutionary War altogether. It precedes colonialism as we know it. You know, all we hear is about the 1700s, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson.
We hear 1776.
So we're talking about a whole 100 years.
A whole 100 years earlier. We understand here that the Quakers were saying, that the Quakers were saying that there needs to be a change and that we've got to do something different. This was taking place in Philadelphia, Rob. And I was kind of intrigued by this because we ever became a nation. There was a part of white America that was saying, we need to stand up and that we need to begin to bring change. And one thing that I need to say about of social justice is that social justice has always been something that has never been a black thing, but it has been the support of white America that has stepped up and said, you know what, treatment of one another is important, and we must be able to represent and realize that we are all important to the cause. And so I want to thank those white brothers out there, my white brothers and sisters who are continually leaning in for the cause. And I want to give up the fist to the Quakers who are willing to stand up for the cause even before we were a great nation. But those kinds of interesting things are very important to me. Now, something that is going to be a little bit more interesting, and this has always been up for debate. This is another topic or thought that I want to throw out there. And these are 10 little things that are important in Black history that we don't often talk about. There's an estimated 12.5 million Africans that were shipped to the New World. These are very conservative numbers during the transatlantic slave trade. That knows when they were crossing over to come to this New World. Rob, fewer than 388,000 arrived in the United States in this New World.
Wow.
12.5 million left the countries of Africa. 388,000 made it to this New World. And so that talks about, and that gives us an understanding of the horror. And the Charles Wright Museum in Detroit, Michigan, down on Warren Avenue, it gives us, you need to go there because they have an exhibit called The Middle Passages, where you go through and you're able to see how the slaves are stacked on top of each other.
Yes.
And how the feces would basically, they were urinating on themselves, and the feces was basically rolling down underneath, to the bottom, and they would come through and clean out the bottom. But could you imagine traveling thousands of miles stacked on top of each other? So if one individual got malaria, a lot of the individuals that came died to malaria because it was so horrific and because they were in such close quarters. But when you look at that 12.5 million people, some of them were thrown overboard once they got sick. Only 388,000 of those made it to this New World. So when we look at how we got here and we talk about history and ancestor DNA and 23andMe, we often find out that there are roadblocks to us finding out the entirety of our history, because much of that history is at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. So I think it's important for us to begin, for Black historians and colleges and universities, to begin to go in and talk about those very key pieces to our America. Now, Rob, something else, and I know we're coming down, but these are interesting facts that I want you guys to begin to go out there and to research. History is fun, but it's always better when you do your portion of research. When we talk about the cowboys and Indians, my grandfather loved cowboys and Indians, and that's offensive right now,
Native
but that's
Americans.
what I mean. On TV growing up, we watched the cowboy and Indian movies. There was Tonto and the Long Ranger. There was Gunsmoke. My grandfather was such an avid, born in 1919, son of a sharecropper who was once a former slave. He loved cowboy and Indian movies, and I could never understand that. Well, what we found out is that 1 in 4 cowboys were Black men. And very interesting. And despite what we saw on TV with Tonto and the Long Ranger, which we now understand is just innately racist, when we look at this and we look at the fact that Black men were cowboys, and I had an opportunity to go to a Black rodeo, and it was all Black men that were steering cattle and bull riding and doing all those amazing things, to find out that 1 in 4 cowboys were Black men. When you think about it, it makes sense. When you think about herding animals and who would be responsible for doing those, what would be considered menial tasks, would seem, make sense that the Blacks would do it if slavery existed. But when we look at the fact that they have now created this whole dynamic and this money storm of going to the rodeo and cowboys and ranching, it's a very interesting principle that I think that is often lost. Many times they weren't allowed to ride in public and do those things, but they were the ones that were breaking bucks. The word breaking bucks is when you have a horse that is very strong. There's another African American colloquialism we'll talk about. We'll say that for a whole nother day. But and you're taming a horse that is a very strong horse that has never been ridden. And so African American men were doing that very strongly, and a key piece of what takes place. Now, I'm going to give you this one because Rob, how much time do we have here? Oh, we got almost 4 minutes. Esther Jones. Rob, do you know who Esther Jones is?
I believe I heard the name.
Okay. Esther Jones is a famous Black jazz singer in Harlem. So when we talked about the Harlem Renaissance and we talked about the music of that 1920 period, remember in Harlem, there was this major immersion of Black culture where Blacks were defining themselves for the first time in a ways. And so we had the Harlem Renaissance taking place in the Northeast, I guess you would say. And then also during a very similar time, Black Wall Street fully emerging in Oklahoma. And so this particular jazz singer, Esther Jones, was the real life Betty Boop. She was actually the iconic figure by which this cartoon caricature was developed from, and never really given the full, what would you call it, license or the respect for being the muse for which we now understand who this character was. What are you saying, Rob? You now remember that? I remember that. And so I thought that was so interesting when we look at this and we see how they have taking this childlike character and they developed. If you go back and you look at some of the earlier drawings and renderings, you can kind of see that this was a Black woman that they were using at this particular muse, but wildly famous, an iconic figure in America. And she was actually developed from an American jazz singer during the Harlem Renaissance by the name of Esther Jones. And I thought that was absolutely beautiful. We talk about Amelia Earhart, who has one of the first, Amelia Earhart, first woman to fly and all of these other things. But I want to share with you on today, the first licensed African-American female pilot was named Bessie Coleman. And that was in 1892, born in Atlanta, Texas. So we were doing great things. We talk about the Tuskegee Airmen and what they were able to accomplish in the war. But we had Black women who were also flying and aviating and doing great things. And her desire was she flew to France. And there is a reason and there is a history. Other artists such as Josephine Baker. There is a reason that many of our great entertainers and those who were musicians, they fled to France. And it was because France was a very open nation that embraced our Blackness. It embraced the beauty of our dark skinned. And so we saw a number of individuals, Billie Holiday, Josephine Baker, that would often go to France because the issues that they suffered from here in the United States as it related to race and the inability to be accepted, fair pay and those things, they never had to deal with to the degree that they had to here in the United States. So they fled to France. And many of them, we see Tina Turner. She said that she was embraced in the UK in a way that she never was embraced here in the United States. But I think it's important that we take our time, that we appreciate those things. The last thing that I want to share to you, 1960 or 1664, they outlawed interracial marriage. And it was not overturned until 1967. And we look at where we are now today. 19, you said you were 4 years old. What did you say? 400 years later. Absolutely. And so when we look at this, it's important to understand that these conversations of race in America, these little known history facts, they open up a world for us to begin conversations that will empower us to become better. I always say that we are better together. I dream, as I often do, not of a country or a world where we are red states and blue states, that we are Black or white, that we are truly United Shades of Gray. David Nay, I see you tuning in out there on social media. I want to give you a shout out. I love you guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. God bless you all. Grace and peace.